Hi, I'm Stephanie, and I'm here to talk about my proposed action research. Now, I come from a family background of teachers, so I guess you can say that teaching is in my genes. However, I have known that I have wanted to be a teacher since before I can remember. It is because of this background that teaching has become my passion. Now, I know that the education system is far from perfect, but that's okay because even though we are teachers, we are continuous learners, just like our students. If I have learned anything from Teachers College, it is simply that we are always continuously learning as new research becomes available. Therefore, it is because of my love of learning that I have come up with some core values that I believe are associated with the profession. My first core value is that of responsibility. I believe that it is my responsibility to stay current with teaching practices so that I am better able to connect with my students and help them learn. One of the most responsible things I can do as a teacher is maintain my professional development, as professional development is key to continue my learning and stay current with all the research. In order to be a responsible teacher, I must also practice in reflection in order to understand myself better and my teaching better so that I can help my students more. Being a responsible teacher also means that I must help my students in any way possible. One of the most interesting ways that we can do this is by differentiating our lessons and our assignments so that every student can be successful, and this is done by looking at their own needs. One of my next core values is that of student learning and engagement. I strongly believe that there needs to be change within our schools in order for students to become more engaged with the material. We notice student disengagement and test scores down, but what we do not focus on is how that material is being taught. By teaching in different ways and understanding how our students learn, we can begin to differentiate our teaching so that students are actively engaged and wanting to further their knowledge rather than having someone tell them what they have to do. This has become the basis of my research problem. The problem that I see today, especially within my placement experience, is that there seems to be a lot of student disengagement. Students do not understand why they are learning certain concepts and how these concepts relate to their everyday living. One of the quotes that I remember hearing from my students within placement is, "I don't understand why we need to learn about surface area and volume. I am never going to use this and I don't see why I need to learn it." This was rather disheartening, as all of these concepts do have a point, but obviously I was not presenting that material well enough for the student to understand. Therefore, through my own reflection practice, I knew I needed to change in order to connect the student to this material through their own interests. Many teachers also understand the importance of inquiry-based learning, but what I have noticed is that many experienced teachers do not know how to implement differentiation in inquiry-based learning and assess accordingly. This has become the basis of my main research question. How can I, as an educator, differentiate my teaching for my students using an inquiry-based approach to learning and assess accordingly to curriculum expectations? This research question has demonstrated that there are different things that we first need to define in order to fully grasp and understand the concepts. The first being, what is differentiation? In a simple way of explaining, differentiation is about how we change our teaching instruction so that we reach every student based on their own individual needs. This, to me, does not just stop, however, with our instruction. In order for students to truly grasp the concepts we teach, we must let them explore using what is best for them in their needs. Another definition that I have come across with this research problem is that of inquiry-based learning. While we all know the importance of inquiry, this is a relatively new term in the field of education. To me, inquiry-based learning is all about the student. This means that the student is responsible for their learning by discovering more about what they need based on their interests. Inquiry-based learning is about taking concepts and skills that we are teaching them, whether it be in math, language, science, etc., and basing those concepts into their own interests. This, of course, takes time and is done in conjunction with both teacher and student. One of the final definitions that we have come across is that of assessment. This is one of the most terrifying aspects of teaching for me, but from my own understanding, assessment is about knowing your students and how they perform. This is where differentiation comes key, as not every student is going to do well on a test. However, we can allow students to demonstrate their learning in multiple ways. This is the truest form of assessment by showing it in different ways, as we want to ensure that students have grasped and understand the concepts. They might know the concepts and understand them thoroughly, but when it comes to writing a test, everything goes blank. But if they are able to demonstrate this learning in different ways according to their needs, they can show us how much they really and truly understand. Some of the literature that I have come across has really helped open my eyes to see how inquiry-based learning and differentiation is working throughout the world. In this first article, Teachers and Students' Perceptions of Autonomy Using Inquiry-Based Learning and Initial Teacher Education, takes the idea of inquiry-based learning and how it can be implemented within the school system. This article mentions how some teachers are still very traditional and therefore are unable to see and implement the benefits of an inquiry-based approach. One of the greatest quotes that I came across in this article, which I take to heart, is, "The role of the teacher is to act more as a facilitator of learning rather than a sole instructor. Educators must begin to see themselves as learning with their students and creating a classroom community where everyone is involved in their own learning." A great example of this is co-creating your success criteria so that students know what they need to know about concepts, but can choose to demonstrate it in different ways. This second article followed the lives of several different teachers throughout the school year and how they planned to implement the inquiry-based approach into their classroom. Through interviews throughout the year, we get a glimpse into how teachers approach the task differently and how we can think about implementing it within our own classroom. I have learned from this article that differentiation is a key component in order to understand how students think about learning, and that creating and designing the class with them helps engagement go up. When engagement is up, student achievement also goes up, as students are becoming more invested in demonstrating their learning and obtaining that higher achievement. This article takes us a step back and looks into the early childhood setting and how curriculum can be manipulated in order to create differentiation for our students. While these students have not yet reached school age, there is still much we can learn into how we can begin to implement the inquiry approach into our classrooms. Through observation and allowing the students to direct their own learning, we can gather important information about their interests and begin to put together assessment pieces that would help every student succeed. Many of the concepts that we teach within the education system can very easily be related to student interests. Therefore, by taking a step back and letting this child show us their interests, we can then relate it to the concepts that we want them to learn. This article takes observation to the next level by not only looking at the students, but also looking at the environment within which students are learning. In order to fully differentiate and properly assess students, we must look at the environment around us and see how this can have an effect. Looking at the environment is important because we want to see how students work within the environment and guide our lessons to that learning style. Assessment may seem difficult at times, but only because the activity for demonstrating that learning does not fit within the environment. Working with students and knowing the environment will guide us as to how activities can be done. Therefore, this is my research plan. Within the schools and my own classroom, I want to have different data sources. These data sources are observations, interviews, analysis of student work, and journals. The two most important data sources that I will be using to conduct my research is that of observations and interviews, as these two data sources help me become more intimate with the students and the teachers that I'm working with. When we talk about the triangulation of data, we must know that the student is always at the top, because the student is who we are to be expecting to reach. For this research question, the two most important data pieces are anecdotal observations and interviews with students. This will help us to bring us into the mind of the student and begin to understand how we can modify our teaching. In order to ensure validity, proper organization of notes and interviews will be key. Anecdotal and observations are important and can back up any type of assessment. These notes will ensure validity because they are written on the current students, but we must know that these will change every year depending on our class and our students. These data sources are reliable because they are done one-on-one with the student as well as by the actual teacher doing the observations. These are all confidential, and the teacher begins to understand their students on a more intimate level and on their learning process. The participants in this research will of course be the students, as I am trying to ensure that they are able to succeed within the classroom. The skills and concepts I want to teach them, of course, have a way to be taught, but our focus is going to be on how to relate these concepts to students' own interest and skill levels. Other participants that can be within the study would be other teachers. Myself being a new teacher, I don't have much experience, but interviewing other teachers and gathering more knowledge is helpful to begin and get me started. The setting, of course, will be within the classroom, as this is where most of our learning will take place. For the first part of my research, I want to do this within a 4-month period. Therefore, after Christmas break, coming back, I can see how I can really put my research into action. Anecdotal notes will be done daily on the lessons. Once a week on Fridays, a summary of the week will be completed. Again, this will be done from September to December. Interviews will be conducted periodically with students throughout these 4 months. Interviews will take place approximately once a month to catch up with students, and more if needed depending on each student. Journals will be done once a week for students to write about how they are feeling about current assignments and what we as the teachers can do to help them. This is also confidential, as students can truly write what they think and talk to the teacher in their own way about what they need if they don't feel comfortable approaching it as a whole class. Any notes that I take throughout this process will be kept confidential and kept away from people who could potentially grab them by mistake. During this process, only first names will ever be used for reference. In terms of actually presenting the research, no student names will be used, only synonyms. Prior to beginning this research assignment, I will have had a discussion with my students about why I'm asking certain types of questions and the purpose for their responses. It is important to ensure that the students understand that their confidentiality is being met and that none of this information is being used by other people. This is strictly for my own research into how I can better help them. At the beginning of this process, I mentioned that many teachers still have trouble integrating inquiry-based learning into their classrooms. By conducting this research, I hope to not only help myself in preparing for my own classroom, but help other teachers. Inquiry is an important aspect in a child's learning. We as teachers must bring this natural curiosity into the classroom and help students achieve more based on their skills.